Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the silence that should terrify you the most. What would you do if the person everyone underestimated held the power to change everything? Let us know in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe as this story unfolds. Dorothy McAllister had buried more than one name in her lifetime. Some she mourned, some she made disappear. At 90, she moved slowly, sure, but not because she was weak. Her movements were calculated, intentional. Every creak of her joints, every measured step with her cane was masking a precision that hadn't dulled in 70 years. Her mind was a labyrinth built in the crucible of war, one that only the most trusted few had ever dared to navigate. She hadn't always been Dottie from Dobbinsville, the quiet, lace-wearing widow who kept to herself on Sycamore Lane. Before that, before the world forgot what she'd done for it, she'd been codenamed Ferret, a signals intelligence officer who decoded messages from bunkers deep in Berlin to jungle camps in Burma. The president used to know her name. Now, the barista at the corner cafe barely glanced up when she ordered chamomile tea, which, if you asked Dottie, suited her just fine. The trouble began with laughter. Low, contemptuous, and just loud enough to carry across her white picket fence. She was deadheading her peonies when the growl of motorcycles rolled up the street like thunder through a canyon. She didn't even flinch. The iron fangs had a sound, a stink, a presence that wrapped itself around her town like an oil slick. Vince Viper Maddock led them like a wolf on a chain he pretended he'd broken. Everyone knew him. Everyone looked away when his boys rolled in. They didn't know that Dottie had seen men like him before. The Viper dismounted slowly, like someone trying too hard to be watched. His boots hit the sidewalk like they owned it. Dottie didn't glance up, but her ears tracked every footfall. "Afternoon, Granny?" he called out with that grin he reserved for strip clubs and mug shots. "You miss a payment, or you just playing hard to get?" Dottie pinched a wilted bloom from its stem, dropped it in her bucket, and said nothing. The boys laughed. 3 of them, young enough to be her great-grandsons, arrogant enough to believe the world owed them a spotlight. One had a beer still sweating in his hand. Another tossed a cigarette into her lawn. "I said," Viper repeated, walking up to her gate and tapping on it with the flat of his hand, "you might want to think twice about ignoring me." Dottie finally looked up. Her eyes were the color of storm-tossed steel, ancient and unblinking. "I've had men try to scare me with guns, knives, and helicopters. Your toys don't impress me," she said. Then she turned her back and resumed trimming her garden. For a moment, silence. Even the birds seemed to hush. Viper's mouth twitched. No one ever talked back to him like that. Not here, not in his town. He reached for the gate latch. "You touch that," Dottie said without looking, "and I'll treat it like trespassing. And you don't want me to treat you like a trespasser." One of the bikers chuckled nervously. "Yova pipe, she's got some bark." "Yeah," Viper sneered. "Let's see if she's got bite." The latch clicked. Dottie turned. "You take one more step, young man, and I'll be forced to make a call I haven't made in over 30 years. Lady, the only call you're making is life alert," he said, pushing open the gate. And then the cane moved, not like a fragile thing an old woman clings to, but like a baton in trained hands. Before Viper could blink, she swung the cane in a smooth arc, slamming it into his knee. He buckled with a howl. The others stepped forward, fists rising, but Dottie simply raised her phone. Her thumb hovered over a button marked with a strange red symbol, one that didn't match any app they recognized. "You want to see what real protection looks like?" she asked, tilting her head. "Go ahead, make your move." The phone beeped. Viper, clutching his leg, snarled, "What the hell is that?" Dottie smiled for the first time that day. "That, son, is a promise." She turned and went back to her garden, leaving the 3 of them in the driveway, sweating in their leathers, stunned and suddenly uncertain. No cops showed up. No neighbors peeked out. But something in the air had shifted. and they felt it. And far away, deep inside a secure line buried behind layers of encryption, a phone began to ring. The next morning the town was humming, but not in the way it usually did. Dobbinsville was the kind of place where gossip clung to clotheslines like freshly washed sheets, and nothing stayed secret for long. But this was different. This wasn't just church chatter or the school principal being spotted buying wine on a Tuesday. No, this was something heavy. This was fear disguised as curiosity. People talked about the old woman on Sycamore Lane, the one who laid out rose petals on her front walk and wore pearls to the grocery store. They whispered about the iron fangs retreating, limping, cursing, red-faced, from her property the day before. Someone said she had a weapon. Someone else said she had a panic button connected straight to the Pentagon. And then someone used her real name, not Dottie, but Dorothy McAllister. The name dropped into the conversation like a match into dry grass. That name wasn't just old, it was archival. Sealed behind clearance levels few people in town could even spell. A retired librarian named Millie Jenkins claimed she once saw the name in a Cold War documentary. Something about code breaking. Maybe spies. Maybe the CIA. Or was it the OS? By lunch, her name had turned from gossip into legend. Dottie sat by the window of her reading room, sipping from her teacup with an amused glint in her eye. Her fingers traced the handle out of habit, muscle memory from decades ago, when she'd used the same motion while waiting for intercepted Soviet transmissions. She wasn't worried. She was calculating, anticipating, and she already knew what would happen next. Someone would come asking questions. Right on time, the doorbell rang. It wasn't the bikers. It wasn't the sheriff either. It was Lena Torres, her next-door neighbor. The young mother with a toddler named Max and a German shepherd named Buddy. Lena was kind, thoughtful, and, like most people, completely unaware of who she lived next to. Until now. "Hi, Miss Dottie," Lena said, nervously shifting from foot to foot. "I hope I'm not bothering you." "You're not," Dottie replied. "Come in. I've got chamomile on the stove, and you look like someone with too many questions and not enough caffeine." Lena stepped inside, glancing around like the furniture might be listening. She took the tea with both hands and sat gently on the edge of the flower-print love seat, eyes scanning the room. The air smelled like lemon polish and lavender. A framed photo of a man in uniform, naval, early 50-ish, stood on the mantel. The whole place felt preserved, like a time capsule wrapped in lace. Lena finally spoke. Are you okay?" Dottie tilted her head. "Perfectly. Why?" "Well, I mean, the bikers, yesterday. Viper's not the kind of guy who walks away from anything. A child with too much leather and not enough direction," Dottie said plainly. "They were playing a part. They just didn't realize the stage belonged to someone else." Lena blinked. "You're not scared of them?" "I've been scared of things, not them." Lena looked down at her teacup, suddenly very small in her hands. "There's talk around town," she said, "about who you really are." Dottie's fingers tightened around her cane. "Let them talk. Some say you used to work for, I don't know, intelligence, the government." Dottie raised a brow. "Do I look like a spy to you?" Lena didn't laugh. "You don't look like a woman who flinches," she replied. "You look like someone who's seen things." There was a silence between them, a respectful one, not the silence of avoidance, but of recognition. Like something old stirring in both women. Lena, despite her youth, had the quiet scars of a military spouse. Late nights, missed calls, folded flags. Dottie could see them even if they weren't worn on sleeves. "Viper and his boys," Lena continued. "They came back last night. Just stood across the street. No noise, no yelling, just watched your house." "I know," Dottie said. "How do you know?" "I used to teach people how to watch without being seen. It's easy to spot amateurs." Lena leaned forward, whispering now, as if the lace curtains had ears. "Miss Dotty, are we in danger?" For the first time the old woman sighed, not with fear, but with something closer to weariness. She set her teacup down on the side table and looked Lena dead in the eyes. "There's a file in Washington thicker than a Bible with my name on it. Half of it's blacked out with ink that doesn't fade. I kept this country safe before some of those boys were born, and I never once asked for recognition." Her voice hardened. "But what I won't do is let my own home turn into a playground for thugs." Lena swallowed. "Do you need help?" Dotty considered the question, then smiled gently. "I need you to keep an eye on Max and Buddy. That boy's going to grow up in a town that remembers how to stand up to cowards." And just like that, Lena understood. Dotty wasn't preparing for a fight. She was preparing the town to remember. Because sometimes the greatest threat to tyranny isn't power, it's memory. And when the past rises with a cane in hand and steel in her spine, the bullies who think they own the present don't know what hit them. Outside, across the street, 3 bikers leaned on their bikes, arms crossed, eyes narrow. They didn't laugh this time. They didn't call out names. They just watched. Watched a 90-year-old woman in a cardigan walk Lena out to the sidewalk and nod to her like she was handing off a relay baton. And from behind a parked car, 2 men in dark suits with earpieces quietly nodded back. The shadows were shifting. The rules had changed. And Dorothy McAllister was just getting started. Viper hadn't slept. Not really. He sat in the back booth of Lou's bar, one boot up on the seat across from him, watching the bartender wipe the same spot on the counter for the 4th time. The lights were dim, the air thick with stale beer and cigarette ghosts. A Johnny Cash song played low on the jukebox. He didn't hear the words. He was replaying yesterday, again and again, like a movie reel on fire. She didn't flinch. That old woman, what was her name? McAllister? She'd taken him down with a cane and a stare that could have carved stone. His knee still throbbed, and it wasn't just the bone that was bruised, it was everything else. His crew had seen it. Worse, they didn't laugh about it this time. They didn't speak of it at all. That silence hurt more than any swing she threw. Viper glanced at the window. Rain misted against the glass, but he knew it wasn't the weather making the hair on his neck stand. Something was shifting. He could feel it, like a dog feels a coming storm. He pulled out his burner phone and dialed. 1 ring. 2. The line picked up. "You said she was a civilian." The voice on the other end was quiet. "She is. Technically. He said we could lean on her, apply pressure, show the town we're still the ones in charge. That was before she pressed that button." "Was that button?" The pause was long, too long. "You poked a ghost, Vince." "I don't believe in ghosts." "You should." The line clicked dead. Viper stared at the phone like it had lied to him. Back in Dottie's house, the day was quiet, but her hands were not. She sat at the kitchen table. A spread of aged manila folders opened before her like a poker hand. Each document crisp despite the decades, sealed in plastic sheaths, yellowed at the corners. Fingerprint cards, transcripts, coded letters typed in courier font and underlined in red pencil. Beside them, a digital tablet glowed faintly, loaded with satellite images, facial recognition scans, and something else. Something that blinked in green and said, "Active, Protocol 47. He didn't need to look outside to know the 2 men in the sedan hadn't moved. Agent Caroline Ruiz had arrived at sunrise, young, sharp, the kind of woman Dottie would have trained personally in another life. She stood in the hallway now, arms crossed, watching. "You're not supposed to have that tablet," Ruiz said flatly. Dottie didn't look up. "I designed the system. I never signed it away. The directive said limited oversight." "Of no oversight." Ruiz stepped closer, lowered her voice. "With all due respect. You shouldn't be here. Your name is still flagged in Tier 7. When they see it lit up, things move. Heavy things. Dottie finally looked at her. Then let them move. Ruiz inhaled slowly. The bikers are planning something. I know. We intercepted chatter on a CB band. They're trying to call in extra muscle, some cousin from the old prison days, someone who carries scars and no last name. I know. Ruiz leaned forward now, eyes searching. Then why aren't we moving you to a secure location? Because this town doesn't need another abandoned elder. It needs a reminder. Ruiz stood silent, the words heavy between them. On the street, Lena was standing on her porch. She hadn't gone to work that day. Her son Max played in the yard, oblivious, while Buddy, the dog, kept circling the perimeter. Lena's eyes tracked the same black motorcycle that kept idling past their houses. 3 times now, each slower than the last. And then a different sound, the unmistakable thud-thud of boots stomping down gravel. Sheriff Blake Connolly emerged from his cruiser, hand in hand, walking up Dottie's path with a look halfway between apology and dread. He didn't knock, he couldn't. Dottie opened the door before his knuckles touched wood. Sheriff, Miss McAllister, he hesitated. We've got a situation. Tell me something I don't know. There's talk of a rally tonight. Not just the Fangs. Outsiders. People coming in from 2 counties. I figured. They're saying it's because of you. I know it's because of me. Sheriff Connolly shifted uncomfortably. They're threatening the community center, the library, said if the town keeps backing you, they'll make everyone feel it. Dottie stepped back, gesturing him inside. He didn't sit. She walked past the kitchen, past the photos of her late husband, past the awards from long decommissioned branches of intelligence services, into a room most people never saw. She opened a chest that hadn't been touched since Nixon's resignation. Inside, a pair of leather gloves, a rolled blueprint, a lanyard with an expired clearance badge still showing active level health. She held up the blueprint and looked at Blake. We're not waiting for them, she said. What are you saying? I'm saying it's time this town remembers what community means. Miss Dottie? No, she interrupted gently. Not Miss Dottie. Not anymore. Blake didn't argue. He couldn't. The old woman in front of him might have been wearing house shoes and smelled like gardenia, but she was also standing straighter than she had in years. Her voice carried something. Command. Finality. And when she turned to the screen again, where coordinates pulsed like a heartbeat, her finger hovered over a new prompt. Engage. Community response. Outside, the sky remained overcast, but it wasn't the clouds that warned of the coming storm. It was the stillness, like the town was holding its breath. And for the first time in a long time, Viper had the gut-deep realization he was no longer hunting. He was being drawn in. The gravel cracked under boots and wheels as the iron fangs rolled in, louder, meaner, more aggressive than before. They brought reinforcements this time, just like the sheriff had warned. Unshaven men with prison tattoos, stripped mufflers and chains hung like ornaments from their handlebars. They revved their engines in a slow parade down Main Street, like conquerors in a land they'd already claimed. Except they hadn't. Not this time. People didn't hide in their homes today. They lined the sidewalks, arms crossed, faces calm but resolute. Farmers, teachers, veterans with ball caps that told you where they'd served. Storefronts flew American flags that hadn't seen sunlight in years. A quiet line had been drawn, not in chalk, not in words, but in presence, in memory. Viper pulled up in front of the library and killed the engine. His boys followed, parking in a staggered fan around him. The rumble of engines died, but tension filled the vacuum like a loaded spring. He stepped off his bike with a smirk, scanning the crowd. He expected fear. Instead, he saw expectation. And right at the center, walking out from the steps of the library with her cane in one hand and a file folder in the other, was Dorothy McAllister. She wore a navy wool coat with brass buttons and no name tag. Her shoes were polished black leather. Behind her, Agent Ruiz stood in a gray suit and dark sunglasses, earpiece tucked in, posture military, rigid. Dorothy stopped 3 feet from Viper and looked him straight in the eye. "Vincent Maddox," she said, clear and loud, "you've violated federal law by attempting to extort a decorated veteran, intimidate a civilian population, and obstruct ongoing federal oversight of an active intelligence asset." The smirk on Viper's face twitched. "You don't scare me with your mumbo-jumbo," he muttered. "No?" Dorothy opened the folder, revealing a photograph. Viper, 2 years ago, in Nevada, meeting with someone the Bureau had flagged as a cartel intermediary. "You should have cleaned your records better. Or at least not posed for photos near cell towers." He blinked. "I know what you're doing," he barked. "You think your badges and files are going to stop what's coming? We're not just some biker gang. We've got people, we've got—" "We know exactly who you've got," Ruiz interrupted, stepping forward now, her badge held up. "And they're not here. You know why?" She turned slightly and gestured behind her. From the church parking lot and the alley beside the hardware store, men and women began stepping forward. Not police, not soldiers. Veterans. In wheelchairs, with service dogs, with prosthetics and worn caps. Slowly, silently, they formed a semicircle around the gang. Some of them had retired decades ago, some had only just come home. None looked away. One man held a sign, "You don't intimidate warriors." Another, a Marine vet with his silver star pinned to his jacket, stood with a cane and said quietly, "You've been asked to leave. That's your chance." Viper laughed, but it was hollow. He looked back at his crew, but something was off. They were fidgeting. 1 or 2 weren't meeting his eye. A third quietly reached down and took the keys out of his ignition. One by one, his so-called reinforcements began to feel the heat of reality, of consequence. This wasn't a backwoods town too scared to speak. This was a line, and they had crossed it. Then came the final blow. A low hum echoed over the rooftops. From behind City Hall, 2 black Suburbans rolled in slowly, flanked by 2 unmarked black motorcycles. Out stepped 3 men in suits. Stern, efficient. One handed Ruiz a device. She tapped it, and a projection screen flipped down from the side of a van across the street. And there she was, on screen. A photo of Dorothy McAllister at 22 years old, sitting at a long desk of encrypted machines in London, headphones on, her hands mid-gesture as she decoded a Soviet cipher. Another photo, shaking hands with President Eisenhower. Then another, pinned medals, blurred operations, declassified documents. Each one met with gasps from the town. Each one a nail in the coffin of doubt. She was no ordinary neighbor. She was a national asset. Dorothy turned back to Viper. "Your games end here. You won't hurt this town, or anyone in it. The people behind you may have followed you out of fear, but look at them now." Viper did, and he saw what he hadn't expected to see. His own power gone, hollow. He stepped forward like a man ready to fight, but then froze, because Buddy, the German shepherd, now trained and wearing a service vest, had padded up beside Dorothy and sat down, silent and watching. The dog stared up at him, like he already knew how this would end. There was the final crack. Viper stepped back. Ruiz nodded, raising her hand to the agents near the vehicles. And without handcuffs or sirens, 2 of the bikers peeled away from the group, walking toward the agents, shoulders hunched. A third dropped his cut vest to the ground and walked off into the crowd, disappearing between 2 old war veterans who gave him no attention. The rest began their retreat. Viper lingered a moment longer, eyes scanning the town like it had betrayed him. Then, with a glare that held more shame than fury, he swung his leg over his bike and rode off. Not with thunder, with silence. Later that day, Lena brought Max over to Dorothy's house. The The child ran to her with a drawing of a dog and an old woman holding hands. "That's you," he said. "You're a superhero." Dorothy chuckled and ruffled his hair. "I'm just someone who remembers what the world used to be," she said, "and what it can be again." That night, the town gathered in the square. They brought candles. Some brought medals. Veterans spoke. Children listened. And when it came time to honor the hero among them, they didn't just cheer. They saluted, not with fingers to foreheads, but with hands extended, offering thanks, stories, flowers, songs. Dorothy stood among them, not above. And in the glow of 100 flickering flames, Dobbinsville remembered not just one woman's strength, but the strength that still lived inside them all.